Welcome to the Wise Photographer Podcast with your host, Chelsea Wise. Each week, Chelsea is bringing you the best tips and tricks to help you create a joyful, profitable, more purpose-filled photography business. Chelsea is a wife and mom of two who has built a thriving photography business in her tiny hometown in western North Dakota. Without further ado, here's your host, Chelsea Wise.
Hello, friend, and welcome to the very first episode of the Wise Photographer Podcast. I am so excited and pumped and a little bit nervous for you to tune in and listen to what it is that I have to say. So, my name is Chelsea Wise. I am a wedding photographer in Northwest North Dakota, and I want to start this show off by sharing my story because my story is truly what has led to the start of this podcast and has meant so much for me and my business. And I really just want to share it with you today. So growing up, we moved around a lot as kids. From the time I was born until my sophomore year of high school, I lived in 17 different houses and attended 11 different schools. That is a lot for anyone. And then I transferred from a class size of 250 down to 26. It sounds impressive when I say I graduated 11th in my class, but when you learn that there was only 26 of us, I was right in the middle of the pack. In high school, I started dating my now husband, Justin Wise, and he's actually my best friend's older brother. So I made a promise my junior year of high school that I would never break his heart. So I pretty much sealed the deal that we were going to be getting married when I made that promise to my best friend Erin in the girls' locker room. When it came time to graduate high school, they ask you, what do you want to be? And they put it in the yearbook and it's in the slideshow that they show at graduation. And I put in there that I wanted to be a photographer, which is a little bit crazy if I really think about it, because there was no school newspaper. I did not work on the yearbook. There were no photography classes. I hadn't photographed anything since I lived in Kansas and had taken photography in 4-H. Through 4-H, I learned how to shoot on a film camera, a Pentax K1000, and had won a few ribbons at our local county fair with a couple of my images. But in all, I hadn't really photographed much since then. So it's kind of crazy to me that I thought I wanted to be a photographer, and I really had no idea what type of photographer. I just knew I wanted to be a photographer. So I enrolled in college, and I knew if I wanted to make it as a photographer, I should really understand the business side of things, because as long as I understood how business worked, if the photography part of it didn't work out, I would always have the, business degree to fall back on. Well, that was great in theory, but my sophomore year of college, I actually got pregnant with our daughter Skylar and ended up dropping out of college and never finished my 4-year degree. So fast forward to 2012, so I dropped out of school. Skylar was born in August of 2012, and then we got married in October of 2012. I struggled that first year to really find my footing and to find my identity in my new roles as a wife and as a mom. And after, a couple of crying sessions on the bathroom floor, I realized that I really needed to find something, a project, anything that was mine and mine alone. And that's when I circled back to this photography idea. And that's when, digital cameras were becoming a lot more accessible. And so I got a camera and I opened up shop in 2013 with Creations by Chelsea LLC. And I loved it. It was an amazing outlet for me. I was still able to be home with Skylar, and we live on a farm and ranch. So there is constantly things going on around our farm that I need to be able to drop what I'm doing and kind of help out with. And I could stop editing for, 20, 30, 42 hours to go run and get parts for tractors or combines, or go help with fencing, or if we needed to move cows, like that was an option. So this photography business was really ideal for me. And because I had always been interested in like the business side of things, I realized that I needed to be really smart in how I used my time in my business, because I was a new mom, I was a new wife, and I valued my time in those roles. I didn't want my photography business to take away from my new baby or from my time with my husband. So I just dove right into education and um, pricing and all of that. And I charged quite a bit starting off, which was good because it really forced me to step up my game and learn and shoot a lot better, a lot quicker than I think I would have had I started out at a lower price point. So things were going great. I was kind of shooting a little bit of everything, but mostly families. And I liked families. That's where I really like honed my craft and, really worked on creating workflows and email templates and streamlining my booking process and all of that. But then part of me just didn't feel like families was really what I was supposed to be shooting. So I decided to go into seniors, and seniors were interesting. I have 4 younger sisters, so I shot all of their senior photos, and that was really eye-opening to me as a photographer, just how hard some of the girls could be on themselves after seeing their pictures. And it really took me a while to realize that like not everything that I was hearing about it had anything to do with my photos. Some of it was just, girls just being hard on themselves. And I just didn't want to live in that world very long. And I had photographed a few weddings, and I would say maybe by the time I photographed maybe my 4th or 5th wedding, I really fell in love with wedding photography. I liked that things were planned so far in advance so that I could really set my schedule and had time to get a babysitter, and, no one was canceling on me last minute for a volleyball game that they forgot about or something along those lines. And weddings are mostly in the winter, or not in the winter. They're definitely not in the winter in North Dakota. They are in the summer and the fall, and that is when I love shooting outside. I do not enjoy freezing my butt off at -30 degrees with a wind chill in North Dakota in the dead of January. It's not my favorite. So wedding photography just seemed like a really good fit for me. And, I was booking out, it was going great. I was kind of phasing out the seniors and the families. There was a few families I was still photographing that I had started shooting in the beginning, and I loved working with them and they loved working with me. So I actually still shoot some families every year, just some of my past clients, and it's fun to watch those families grow. But then in 2016, in July, my husband went in for a scheduled aortic valve replacement surgery. So he had open heart surgery to replace his aortic valve. He was born with a bicuspid valve. So basically what that means is inside your valve, you should have 3 little valve like flaps that open and close to let blood in or let blood out. And he was born with only 2. So as the heart was trying to pump blood out, the valves wouldn't seal completely and blood would get back in. So he's known this since he was 18 months old. And the goal has always been to wait until he was an adult, if possible, because that way he would only have to have 1 surgery, because his heart would be full grown, and they would put in a mechanical valve, which means one, he would be on blood thinners, but two, it would only be one surgery. It should never wear out, and one and done kind of thing. So we went in for surgery in July of 2016. He had the surgery on a Monday. We had a few days in the hospital. We got home on a Friday, and I drove 2.5 hours to photograph a wedding on Saturday, which my husband was not super happy that I had left him at home right after a heart surgery, but he did okay, and it was fine. It was a shorter wedding, and I came home right afterwards, and everything was all right. We actually found out that I was pregnant the night before his heart surgery. And this was exciting, but also really scary because in April of that year, I had had a miscarriage. And I wasn't very far along, but it was still, we were trying and hoping, and it was really devastating when we had that miscarriage. I was actually on my way to a funeral for my grandma down in Florida and started having a miscarriage on an airplane over somewhere in Iowa, probably. And it really sucked because I had my sisters there and my dad there, but my husband wasn't there with me, and it was hard. So when we found out I was pregnant, it was really exciting, but I was also really scared because we'd already had a miscarriage. My husband was going in for heart surgery the next day. Like, this is scary. But the second pregnancy, it went great. We went in and had an ultrasound, and there was a heartbeat, and we were so excited. So I finished out my wedding season that fall, trying not to puke my guts out because morning sickness is definitely something I struggle with hardcore during my pregnancies. And as soon as Justin was like pretty much healed up is when my morning sickness started. So I went from, helping him because he couldn't lift anything more than about 6 pounds, which meant he couldn't even open doors or really even pull open the fridge door. So that was a little bit of an adjustment. So as soon as he was pretty much healed up and released to go back to work, I started getting sick. So he had to kind of start taking care of our daughter, Skylar, and just helping out around the house a little bit more just because I was just run down. So I photographed quite a few weddings that next fall, very pregnant. And then in December, I booked a job to photograph a opening of a gas plant in our area. We live in the middle of oil field country out in western North Dakota. And so this gas plant was opening, and they just wanted someone to come photograph the grand opening. They had some big CEO and bigwig clients that were kind of flying in for the opening, and they wanted to kind of photograph it and really showcase it. So that was really exciting. It was really cold, but it was pretty cool. I got to tour the outside and the inside of the gas plant. On that tour, we had to shut off our phones so that it didn't interfere with any of their electronics for the gas plant. So when I got done photographing that and I got back in my car and thawed out my hands a little bit, I turned my phone back on, and I had a voicemail from my husband. Now, the week before this session, he had been starting to kind of get sick, and we thought it was just kind of a cold. He had a little bit of chest pain, but, he had just had open heart surgery. His sternum was still it's wired together, so it was still kind of healing, and it takes a long time. So we thought maybe that pain in his chest was just how it's going to be for him when he gets sick now. And in that voicemail, he told me that his surgeon had talked to our primary care doctor here in town, and his surgeon wanted him to come back down to Fargo to meet with him and kind of see what was going on. So we would be leaving as soon as I got home from that session, and driving down to Fargo. And that's about a 6-hour drive. So we drove halfway because roads were pretty bad. And then we drove the rest of the way the next morning. We walked into his surgeon's office and they scheduled us for an echo and blood work and all of those fun things. And so we went through all the testing and then we sat in the waiting room and we waited and we waited. And there was other people that were waiting. She was still in surgery from the morning. Something had taken a lot longer than what they had originally planned. So they were starting to reschedule her patients. And so we went up to the desk and we're like, do we need to reschedule? She called us, told us to come down here. And they said, no, she wants to see you still. So you just need to kind of hang out and be patient. So while we were sitting there, I edited the session that I had taken, just the 2 nights before, just that oil field stuff, and just kind of sat there and waited. They finally call us back into the doctor's office, and she walks in with a clipboard in her hand and she says, "You're going to have surgery again." And that was not something that we were expecting. We thought maybe she would put him on some type of antibiotics or something. It was just cold. It should be fine. And come to find out, his heart valve had started to dehiss. So what that means is that the sutures that were holding his valve in place attached to his heart were coming undone, and the valve was not connected to the heart the way it should be anymore. So he would be going into surgery first thing the next morning. And that scared the crap out of both of us. We were escorted directly from her office to a hospital room. And we both just sat there and cried because I was pregnant and emotional to begin with. My husband was scared. Our daughter was at home with grandma and we were 6 hours away from any family, and it was hard. It was really hard. So his mom drove down that night, and Justin's sister Erin, one of my best friends, she drove down from Grand Forks down to Fargo and stayed with us or stayed with me in the hotel while Justin was in the hospital. And Justin went into surgery the next morning for a second valve replacement. Surgery went well. It took a lot longer than the first surgery, and that was scary, just sitting in a waiting room with the windows were iced over because it was so cold outside, and just days before Christmas. And our daughter was only 4 at the time, and she was home with my sister, and I just kept praying that don't let him make it through the surgery, let this be the last one. He's got it'll be 9 more weeks after this, and then we have a baby on the way, so he should be healed up by then. Recovery should only be 6 to 8 weeks afterwards, and then he'll be released to go back to work, and then baby will be here. And so they got out of surgery and we met with infectious disease, and they started him on IV antibiotics that he would be on for the next 6 weeks. And they would have 3 rounds of antibiotics every day. So he had a PICC line put in, and I got taught how to change out his PICC line, hook it up to medicine balls, which are these little home infusion things. They're kind of neat. They mix up the medicine and they send them to you each week. And they're these little plastic balls that are about the size of a tennis ball. And as soon as they're hooked up, they start basically squeezing down and pushing the medication into the PICC line. So he had a double lumen, so he had 2 lines hooked up. And so I changed him out 3 times a day. And then we went into the clinic for PICC line dressing changes. They would change out all of that every week. And then we did that for 6 weeks. Then we headed back down to Fargo and kind of waited anxiously for all the results. His blood work looked great after those 6 weeks. Something got a little bit screwed up with scheduling. So we saw his surgeon before they actually did the echo. And the echo is like a ultrasound or like a picture of his heart, and it really shows like the mechanics and the blood flow and make sure everything is still attached. So she signed off on his paperwork because everything else looked good. She was going to check his echo the next day or the next couple days after we left, but she went ahead and signed his return to work forms. We took off for home, and then the next day we drove to Montana for a bull sale. And I thought that we lived in the middle of nowhere, but this bull sale was truly the middle of nowhere. There was no service at the ranch. So once again, we got back on the highway and there was service, and we got a voicemail. And this voicemail was from his surgeon letting us know that this second valve now was already leaking. And she was sending us on to Rochester, Minnesota, to the Mayo Clinic. So we drove back that 6-hour drive just in silence. We had already been through 2 major surgeries. We had a baby on the way. It was just overwhelming for all of us. So the next week, Mayo got in touch with us and scheduled an appointment and set up labs and ultrasounds and all the testing, and a meeting with a cardiologist who specializes in leaky valves, not so much replacements. They thought that maybe they would be able just to kind of plug the leak, maybe even just go in with a scope and do it. Shouldn't be like a full-on valve replacement this time. So that was hopeful. So we piled in the car, my husband, my mother-in-law, and our daughter Skylar. We all drove down the 16 hours to Rochester, Minnesota, which was a 2-day drive for us. We did break it up. And we got there, checked into our hotels, and then headed to the hospital, or to the gondola building, I guess, to start with the echo appointment. So we get into the echo, and they let you know right away that these echoes at Mayo take a lot longer than normal echoes do. So expect to be there for about 1.5 hours to 2 hours for the echo, which is a lot longer than most echoes are. So, we were in there. I went back with Justin for the echo. We were talking to the technician. They had a student in there, so she was kind of talking the student through doing it. And about 25 minutes into the procedure, a doctor walks in with a white lab coat. She introduces herself, and the whole atmosphere in the room changes. It went from kind of lightheartedness to really serious, really fast. And she let us know that she needed a few more images. She had been watching the images come in from another room across the hallway. So she came in to tell the technician what angles that she needed images from. And the student stepped aside, and the technician really took over. And everyone just quiet. And it was taking everything inside me to not just bust out in tears. It's hard. It was really hard. And after they were done with the echo, she told us that it was a lot worse than what we thought. It was not just a small leak. The valve was completely dehisced. It was flopping around, and it was doing a lot of damage in there just the way it was. So she had canceled the rest of our appointments for the day, and she was admitting us to the hospital. So we needed to go downstairs and get on a patient shuttle and head straight to St. Mary's Hospital where they would be waiting for us. So we walked out of that room, and as soon as my mother-in-law saw us, she knew something was wrong because the doctor was walking us out. And Justin and I were both in shock of that this was happening again. And so the doctor kind of talked to my mother-in-law, told her the same thing she kind of told us, and we took a deep breath and got in the elevator, went and found a patient shuttle and got on it and headed over to St. Mary's Hospital where we got checked in. They brought him into the cardiac floor, which is always an interesting place for us. At the time, he was only 28 years old, and so he was always the youngest person on the cardiac floor, no matter where we were at, no matter what hospital. Cardiac patients are often much older, and so we definitely stick out like a sore thumb. So we get checked in, he gets put on a telemonitor, so he's got, all these monitor things that are checking his heart rate constantly, and it's being recorded and sent to the nurse's station, and he has to shower with the monitor on. He can't leave the floor because the monitor is only set up for, his hallway. And, he's sick, but he doesn't look as sick as he should. He, at this point, is septic, but he doesn't look like he is. He doesn't feel like he is as bad as he should be. So this parade of doctors and nurses and teams are constantly coming in and out of our room to kind of go over his history, and really start to develop a plan of action for this next surgery. So this is in February of 2017, and we finally, after about a week and a half of PET scans and CTs and echoes, and they did an MRI at one point because part of the infection had broken off of his heart valve and had gone up to his brain, and he actually had a mini stroke because of that. And they weren't putting him on any antibiotics right now because they were still trying to figure out what it was that was eating away, what this infection was that was eating away at the stitches around his heart valve. And they never did get anything to grow from any of his surgeries. They cultured the valve itself. They cultured materials that they had taken, of tissue that they had taken out, and they were never able to identify what it was. And that was really scary because if they couldn't identify it, they didn't know how to treat it. And it could always come back. The 6 weeks of antibiotics that they had given him had just suppressed it, but it hadn't stopped it from doing the damage. His blood work looked good, but the physical damage was still happening. So he went in for surgery in Mayo, and it was a 13-hour surgery. They replaced his valve, they did a graft, and they redid the arch of his aortic arch. And we sat in the waiting room for 13 hours and just watched cars drive by and watched everyone else's life keep on going while mine just seemed to stop, because this was a big surgery, and he'd already had 2 really big surgeries. And he's a healthy guy. He's not overweight. He's, strong, young guy, but they were starting to take a toll on him. And the only reason he made it through those 3 surgeries is because he was young and he was at, the physical shape he was in beforehand. But those surgeries were really, really taking a toll on him, on me, on our marriage, and just everyone. And I started sharing our story on Facebook and on my blog, and we had this overwhelming support from our friends and our family and our community. And it's crazy to me the amount of people that our story touched and impacted, and the messages that we got, and the people that shared it. It really just humbles me. But that's not the end of our story either. So he comes out of surgery. He's got the new valve. We stay in the hospital for a while. We stay in the ICU for quite a while because they're waiting for his heart to start beating on its own. At this point, he was 100% dependent on a temporary pacemaker. And this temporary pacemaker was, hanging above him on this monitor with two little wires that were connected to his heart that were making it beat. And those wires were just kind of tacked in there. They weren't in there very securely. So that was really scary. And we just prayed that the swelling would go down and that his heart would start beating on its own. And, about twice a day, the pacemaker team would come in with these doctors that looked way too young to be doctors. But they were great. And they would turn the temporary pacemaker down to see if his heart would start beating on its own. And it never did. So they made the call that he needed to have a permanent pacemaker put in, which, is another set of challenges. It's another fear because he's 100% dependent on it. And, a really large magnet could make that thing stop. And, what are the chances of being around a large magnet? Well, they're actually pretty great because he works in the oil field and generators use magnets, like the big industrial ones. So, he had to be really careful about that. So he went in, and then the pacemaker itself is another foreign body in his body, which is where infection likes to stick to. So not only does he have a metal valve that is basically a magnet for infection, he now has a pacemaker, which is a magnet for infection. The body is really good at cleaning itself, but there's nothing that's really cleaning those foreign bodies in there. So it's a little bit scarier there. We finally get the pacemaker, it's going, they program it, and then we are finally released to the step-down unit. We stay there for a few days, actually probably about a week, and he starts, getting up and sitting. When he was in the ICU waiting for that pacemaker, they didn't want him to move. He couldn't sit up, he couldn't shower, he couldn't use the toilet. Like it was tough. And he stunk a little bit. If you've gone more than 9 days without taking a shower while sitting in a hospital bed, it's pretty disgusting. But he finally was able to take a shower, and that was awesome. He started, being able to go walking on the step-down units and down the hallways. And, I remember there was this teeny tiny little kid who had had heart surgery. I mean, he couldn't be more than 4 or 5 years old. And he still had like the drainage tubes in his chest. He had his little walker and he was walking, and there was a little thick cart behind him that was holding, the collection for his drainage tubes in his chest. And Justin had, was about ready to just kind of call it quits after making one round around the unit, the floor there. But this little kid passed him, and Justin's like, okay, if he can still keep going, then I can still keep going, because no way is this little 4-year-old who still has drainage tubes in gonna pass me. So that was kind of a bittersweet thing to see. So he walked another couple rounds around the hallway, and then it was time for us to go home. And while we had been there, I had missed a couple of my appointments with my OB doctor. I was nearing our due date. I was due the middle of March, and it was the end of February. Our daughter Skylar had came a week early, and so with the added stress of all of everything that we were going on with Justin, my doctor was pretty sure that I would probably go early. So she had actually set up an appointment with me with an OB at the Mayo Clinic. They were a little bit confused when I walked in, like, why are you here from North Dakota? Your pregnancy seems to be going fine. You're measuring, the way you should be measuring. But after I broke down in tears and told them our whole story, they were like, oh, okay, it's going to be all right. If you do go into labor, you are in a hospital. Someone will deliver the baby. Everything will be fine. We'll figure out how to get all of you home afterwards. And so, at least I had somewhat of an idea if I did go into labor, what would happen. But it was finally time for us to go home. I was still pregnant. I'd been having a lot of Braxton Hicks contractions, but things were still holding it together. So we got discharged. We made it to Fargo on a Friday night, and it was late. And our infusion pharmacy is in Fargo. So that's the person, or Chip. He is our pharmacist that does those home infusions, the medicine balls that I was talking about earlier. So he actually met us at the pharmacy at 10:30 at night on a Friday night as we were coming into town because, one, Justin needed his medications that night, and he was going to send us home with the next week's supply as well. So it was great to be working with someone that we had already worked with because we'd already worked with him for 6 weeks, and he was super awesome and super helpful. But it kind of sucked that we were working with him again because it meant that we had another surgery. So we met with Chip, we got our medicine, we checked into our hotel, and stayed the night there, and then we headed home to our home across the state. We got home and we were there for one whole day before I had a doctor's appointment of my own. So we traveled to Williston, which is about an hour away, and I had my appointment with my my doctor was out of town, so I had an appointment with another doctor there, and she checked me, and she's like, well, you're measuring good. You're not really dilated. You're at 2 centimeters right now, but, I'm sure you'll make it another week. You're not due for, 3 more weeks or 2.5 more weeks. So, head home and we'll see you next week at your appointment. As soon as we left there, I drove home and I told Justin, I was like, nope, this baby's coming tonight. So let's go pack our bags again for another hospital stay. Because at this point, we didn't have our hospital bags packed at all or the baby hospital bag, because we'd just been worrying about all of the heart surgery stuff. So we go home, we pack our bags. I can start feeling contractions are really starting to pick up. I can tell that this is going to happen, and it's going to happen tonight or tomorrow. So at that point, Justin couldn't drive because he had just had heart surgery, and he had a weight limit of 7 pounds. So, he couldn't open the hospital, he couldn't open doors for me or anything. So we called my mother-in-law again, and she drove us to the hospital to go have our baby. And we got there, we didn't get checked in right away because they're like, well, we don't know if we'll keep you. You could just be having Braxton Hicks. And they checked me, and I was dilated to 3. And they were like, well, we'll let you, hang out here, walk the halls a little bit. So, Justin had only been able to walk just a few hundred feet. And to really get labor going, you got to kind of keep walking. So he sat in the waiting room, and my mother-in-law, Debbie, and I just walked around the hospital. I had my tennis shoes on and my hospital gown on, and we just kept walking and walking. And she hadn't left yet because we weren't really sure if we were going to stay or if we were going to go. So, if they were going to send us home, she needed to stay there for us to get a ride home. Didn't really make sense for her to drive an hour home just to turn on and drive an hour back to get us. So we stayed there for a while. Contractions were really starting to pick up again, and my nurse figured, we probably will keep you, so we'll go ahead and start getting you, actually checked in. So Debbie left, and I kind of needed to walk again. So Justin sat in the hospital room, and I started walking, and finally it really felt like contractions were, really picking up, and we were going to have this baby. They checked me, and they decided that, I could probably go ahead and get the epidural if I wanted to. And truth be told, I probably wouldn't have gotten the epidural this time around. With Skylar pushing, it was only 4 minutes of pushing with her. And yes, labor hurt, but I think if I'd known it was going to go that quick, I wouldn't have needed it. But with Justin being in his situation, just being totally wore out, and we needed some sleep, I went ahead and got the epidural. And the nurses went and found a big chair, one of the big recliner chairs for Justin to sleep in, and we went ahead and went to bed and got some sleep. And then the next morning, they had shift change right about 7:00. And my new nurse came in, and she decided, she better check me. And she checks me, and I am fully dilated, and it is ready to push. And she's like, don't push. We got to wait for a doctor to get here. So the doctor finally shows up, 2 pushes. Grayson is out at 7:35 that morning. And then I got really scared because he wasn't crying, and he was blue. And I just remember vividly thinking to myself, God, please don't let us have just gone through all of that and not bring a baby home after. And originally we weren't going to we were going to do a delayed cord cutting, but they needed to get him breathing and crying. So they cut the cord, they brought him over to the warmer, and they started just really rubbing him down and just doing anything they could to get him to cry. And he finally cried, and oh my God. Oh, it was such a relief to hear that baby cry. But, he weighed 6 pounds and 8 ounces. So Justin was allowed to hold him, which was such a blessing. It wouldn't have been the end of the world if you couldn't hold him for 6 weeks, but not being able to hold your son after he's born, that would be pretty hard. But luckily I grew pretty tiny babies. So 6 pounds, 8 ounces. Grayson was born on March 9th. So he was 2.5 weeks early, but everything looked great. He just took a little while to cry right away, but he started turning pink, and, the blue faded, and everything was fine. Right after he got done, they got him crying, and they laid him on my chest again. We got a phone call from Chip, our pharmacist, checking to see how we were doing and if, we needed anything else from him. I told him that we had a new baby, and he was the first one to know. So in our next week's shipment of medicine, he sent us a baby card and a baby gift, which was pretty awesome. And we were just so thankful to all be together as a family of 4, because in the hospital at Mayo, I was scared that we would not be a family of 4. I was so scared. But we are. It is wonderful, and I'm so thankful. So through all of that, our relationship, my marriage, it was really put to the test, and, in sickness and in health, that was certainly a vow of ours that was really pushed to the limit that year. And I just had this renewed sense of what my job as a wedding photographer was. And so originally I was planning on taking off January until June when I found out that I was pregnant with Grayson. I knew in January and February, that's when I would be booking clients, but I wouldn't be shooting anything. And so I had, started to set up some things to have blog posts in order and, really start to attract those clients. And when all of this happened with Justin, I had to put a lot of things on hold, and our whole life seemed to just stop and stand still while everyone else's kept going. But I was able to still book clients for the following year. And I could have just taken the time off and said, no, I'm done. But that was the only thing that still felt normal to me. And it gave me some distance and some space to step back from everything that was happening because it was so intense. It was so all consuming. And I just remember like going to the grocery store was so hard because we live in a really small community, which is amazing. Like people are so supportive. And they did a benefit for Justin that I'm still so thankful for and so humbled by the amount of people that showed up in support for him and for our family. But going to the grocery store was one of the hardest things because I would make it down one aisle and then someone would stop and ask how Justin was doing. And because so much had happened and, timelines were so crazy, I felt like I was just telling the same story over and over again to everyone that I met in the grocery store. At this point, our grocery store did not have a order line and drive up and pick up kind of thing. They do now, but they did not then. And so the grocery store was hard for me. And Justin couldn't do it and I had to. And I had a brand new baby that I had to take with me. And everyone was super supportive and just coming out of like a place of kindness, but it was still tough. So being able to have, that space, that thing, that sense of normalcy in my booking stuff, my clients knew, and even my potential clients knew kind of what was going on. And they were all so supportive and understanding if it took me a little bit longer to get back to emails and that type of thing. But it was so awesome to still be able to work and to have that, that little sense of myself still. So I booked out my wedding season in the middle of all of that. So I booked a lot of brides while I was sitting in waiting rooms and went through, all of that, sent out my welcome packets, and it was pretty, it was good. It was really good. And I was very thankful that I was able to do that and that I had created systems and workflows and set up the structure of my business to be able to run it without really thinking about running it. And I'm just so thankful I was able to do that. So the next summer, in 2017, I shot my first wedding in June, and Justin was released to go back to work shortly thereafter. And I had a great summer season and fall season, and then, started to take the winter off again. And then in October, Justin's incision started to drain. And it was just a clear fluid. They thought, maybe he's a pretty slim guy. Maybe his wires on his sternum are just rubbing up against the skin, and that's what's causing this fluid. So they went in and they actually removed the wires around his sternum because it had been long enough that his sternum had fused back together and that it was stable, so it didn't actually need the wires anymore. So they took the wires out in October. And then in December, it started draining again. And that's when we knew that something was up again. It wasn't just the wires, it had to be something else. And my fear that it was infection again. So we went back down to Rochester and we met with our surgeon's PA, and he explained that they were going to do what was called a debridement. So it was kind of an exploratory surgery. What they would do is they would open him up, clean everything out. They might leave his chest open so they could go back in and clean it out again, but they probably wouldn't. They would probably just clean it out the one time. He shouldn't have to stay in the ICU. He should just go straight to the step-down unit, and he'll probably have antibiotics just to make sure everything's all cleaned up again, and we'd go from there. And at this point, like, you want to stay away from Google, like, because you're only going to see the worst case scenarios. But we'd already been through so much that we wanted to kind of prepare ourselves, like, what are the possible outcomes of this? And after kind of all the research that we had done, something we had stumbled upon is that there was a possibility that they could remove his sternum if this sternum was infected, if that's what this was. So we brought that up to the PA, and the PA was pretty adamant about that shouldn't be the case. That is not what's going on here. Google just is going to show you the worst cases, like the worst of the worst. That's not what you have. Like, stay away from Google. Like, okay. So, he made us feel kind of stupid about it, but, at least we asked, right? So we have surgery the next morning, and, it's only supposed to be 2.5-hour surgery. So I've got Grayson. It's just Justin Grayson, our son Grayson. He's only March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December. He's like 10 months old at that point. Cute as a button for sure. He's crawling around, but he's not walking yet. So we've got the stroller, and it's January in Minnesota, so it's cold out. So we've got all the coats and all that stuff too. So if you are having any type of a cardiac surgery at Mayo, they will have the family wait in the ICU waiting room, no matter if it's a big surgery or not. That way, in case they do go to the ICU, you know where you're supposed to be. They can track you down a lot easier. That's where they put you. So we walk out of the day surgery unit, or day surgery, and then they escort all of the cardiac patient families to the ICU. And we walk in, and you meet the ICU director, and she gives you a little pamphlet about what to expect at the ICU in case your loved one has to come here after surgery. And she recognizes me because we had already spent so much time there the year before. She's like, "You look familiar. Have I seen you before?" Like, yes, we spent like 2 weeks here last year when I was very pregnant. This is Grayson. Tell Topher we said hi. So that was kind of funny. And so I showed the rest of the cardiac patient families where the ICU waiting room was and how to get down to the food court. And it's a big hospital, and it's kind of a maze if you don't know where you're going. So we sit in the ICU, and I've got Grayson, and he's crawling around, making everybody laugh, and we're watching the cars go by, not feeling as serious about everything as it could be. So then we hit the 3-hour mark, and it was only supposed to be 2.5 hours. And so I call our nurse who's telling you what's going on in the operating room. And she's like, the last update I got, everything was fine. Everything was scheduled the way it should be. So, we're just kind of sitting here waiting. So then it gets to 4 hours, and I'm still waiting. And at this point, I'm nervous because what happened? What's going on? I'm by myself with a 10-month-old baby. My husband's in surgery that we didn't know we were going to have surgery. We didn't really think he was going to have surgery when we first came down. So that was a little bit of a surprise. And at the 5.5-hour mark, I finally get a call from the nurse patient relay person. And she lets me know that Justin is in the ICU and that his surgeon wants to talk to me. So head back to the ICU, turn on the alert on the third door, and they'll find us when we walk in. So I walk in, and Justin is being wheeled into his ICU room. He still has a breathing tube down his throat, and his cardiac surgeon comes up to me and lets me know that it was worse than we thought. the infection was eating away at his sternum and was basically turning it to mush, and that they had gone ahead and removed his sternum. And that was a hard pill to swallow, because the day before they told us that that wasn't what was going to happen. And now he's in the ICU and I have to make the decisions for him. So they tell me that they had brought in the plastics team while he was still in surgery earlier that day. And they looked, went over his history, looked at everything that was going on, and have decided that they want to do 2 more operations. So I will need to sign release forms for them to do the next 2 operations. They don't want to wake up Justin in between, because at this point, his chest is still open. There is nothing that is really stabilizing his chest. And so they really just need to keep him asleep and sedated. So they tell me that plastics will be calling me later on tonight to answer any questions that I have. They weren't there at the ICU, so I didn't get to speak with them after that first surgery. And I was just terrified. I walked out into the hallway with Grayson in his stroller and just cried and begged God for a different story. But this is the story that he gave us, and we had to keep moving. We couldn't just stop and go home. So first thing I did was call, I'd already been in contact with Justin's mom, and she got on the train and rode that down to Rochester and ended up getting there the next morning. We really questioned whether or not we should have her bring Skylar with or not, but in the end, we decided to let Skylar stay home with my sister and my mom. And that was hard to not have her there with us, because I didn't know how this was going to go. And part of me was like, wanted her there if something really bad happened, but part of me didn't want her there if something bad happened. So she stayed home. Debbie came down, and she got there the next morning. The night after the first surgery, like when they removed his sternum, I went back to my hotel room and loaded everything into the pickup so that the next morning when I woke up, I could move hotels to the hotel that was across the street from the hospital. And trying to load all of our suitcases and pack and play and baby by yourself is challenging in the dead of winter, because I couldn't just leave him in the hotel room. And so finally, after a lot of trips back and forth, and a very nice person at the front desk kind of keeping an eye on him in his stroller while I carted stuff out into the freezing cold to pick up, finally got Grayson and everything into the pickup and to the hotel. So I couldn't check into the next hotel the next morning because he was going into surgery at like 5:30 in the morning. So I left the pickup in the parking lot, and then I had to cart Grayson, his stroller, the diaper bag, and all of our winter coats across the street to the hospital, which wouldn't be a big deal, except there was a major snowstorm that night, and there was snow, like a snow pile that they had cleared the streets, but it was all piled up in the middle of the street, and it was like 4 feet tall. So I couldn't push the stroller across. So I've got Grayson in one arm, all bundled up. I've got the stroller folded up, like trying to carry that in one arm, and a backpack on my back with the diaper bag. And I am just running as fast as I can without slipping and falling. And because it's cold outside, I don't want my baby freezing. And finally, like, make it over the snowbank and into the hospital, into one of the side doors there, and made the little trek up to the ICU. But I have no idea now how I actually made it across that road. It was crazy. So we he goes into surgery, and the first surgery that they want to do is what they call an omentum flap. So your omentum is your belly fat in your stomach, and it doesn't really serve a purpose except for, storing fat, and it has really good blood flow. So they take this belly fat and they pull it up. It's like an apron. They pull it up and they stuff it around the outside of the heart, because the inside of the heart has really good blood flow. It can clean off any infections, but the outside is where infection tends to gather and collect, because there's no great blood flow there to kind of deliver antibiotics and kind of wash away any infection. So this omentum fills all of that dead space. And so they do the omentum, and that, presents its own scary problems, because, as they're detaching the omentum from like your intestines and everything, there's always a chance that they could slit an intestine, and then that opens up, chances for infection again, and, all sorts of other problems with that. Luckily, that surgery goes great. He is still, they still don't want to wake him up yet, and they don't want to put in any type of plate or anything over his heart, because if there's another foreign body, it's another chance for infection. And they still haven't been able to pinpoint what it is that is causing this infection. So they wait 2 more days to do the next surgery, and that one is what is called a pectoral flap. So his pec muscles, they lifted those up and brought them together to make one like long muscle over the top of his chest. And in doing that, he had to basically be in 2 shoulder immobilizers, which meant he, was T-Rex in it. Like he could from his shoulder to his elbow, it couldn't move. Like it had to stay like glued to his side. He could move his hands up and down, but he couldn't move his arms away from his sides so that it didn't like pull that muscle apart that had been stitched together. And so then they, finally stitch him all back up. And he, in between the 2 plastic surgeries, so in between the omentum flap and the pectoral flap, they started to wake him up a little bit. They didn't want to extubate him. They didn't want to take his breathing tube out. They wanted to wait on that because they didn't want him to start coughing and like moving things around. So they woke him up, but they, told him right away, we're not taking your breathing tube out. We just want to make sure, that brain function is still, happening. They hadn't put a central line in for him because this originally was not supposed to be a very big surgery. So because there's no central line, all of our ICU nurses are a little bit more on their toes, because they don't have direct access to make any split decisions, or they can't really use the methods that they usually would use to resuscitate him, or to fix something if something were to go wrong. And since he was also on a breathing tube that whole time, he's one-on-one with a nurse. So he's never has a nurse not looking at him, like one-on-one. So we spent a lot of time with the ICU nurses there, got to know them really well. They were all so great. We had a couple of repeat nurses that we had from the time before, so that was kind of cool. They got to meet Grayson, and Grayson was kind of like the star of the ICU because he was just happy little baby in his little stroller. We had a room that had an annex room on the side, so it was like another little smaller room. So we would park our stroller in there and let Grayson take naps in the stroller, which, like, thank goodness he was still taking naps, because it was hard with a 10-month-old. During that wait time between those 2 surgeries, they did wait 2 days, and when they woke Justin up, his mom was there, and he wasn't expecting his mom to be there, but they gave him a piece of paper, and he started writing on the paper, and he, to me, he said, "I love you," and "Thank mom." And then I got a phone call, so I stepped out, And when I came back in, I just remember Debbie looking up at me with this like ghostly white face, like just looked like she'd seen a ghost. And I knew something had happened, but everyone in the room was still really calm and like there was no alarms going off. Justin was still kind of awake, kind of asleep. But that look on her face, it scared me, but I didn't know what it was. And later on, she shared with me that he, on the paper, had asked, "Am I dying?" And that was scary because, I hope not. I mean, you shouldn't be, but I mean, it's so scary because, does he have some type of like fruition of like seeing something that we don't? But he was scared and I was scared and it was really hard for everyone in that room. But they finally finished up the pectoral flap and then he was in the ICU for another day, and then they finally took his breathing tube out. And after his breathing tube was out and he was up for about 6 hours or so, they moved us to the step-down unit. And that was pretty awesome to be able to move out of the ICU so soon after surgery, because the first time we had waited a lot longer because of the pacemaker. But this time we got to move down to the step-down unit. We were in the step-down unit a little bit longer than what we were the first time around. We had to go through occupational therapy and physical therapy, and he had to practice getting in and out of a vehicle without moving his arms. He had to practice getting dressed and putting a shirt on without taking his arms away from his side. And I had to learn how to help him do all of that. And it was frustrating for both of us. So much more for him because, he's the man of the family, like the provider. And here he is almost 2 years now having to have his wife just do everything for him. And I'm just being so helpless, and I felt helpless for him. But, it really, really put into perspective again, like our marriage vows. And, I'm so glad that he made it through those surgeries and that we did go through those things as a couple, because I don't know where our marriage would be if we hadn't been through these last 3 years together. They really shaped us and shaped our relationship, and I'm so thankful for it. And I'm so thankful that I was able to continue my work as a wedding photographer. So this whole story has done two things for me. It's really clarified the importance that my work is as a wedding photographer, because it truly documents the day that this crazy adventure begins. This crazy adventure of marriage, because marriage is such a beautiful and scary thing, because you're promising to stand side by side through all that life has to offer you, and you have no idea what it is that lies ahead of you. Someone could get sick. There could be cancer diagnosis. You could lose a child. You could struggle with infertility. There's so many bad things that could happen, but there's so many good things too. Getting a new puppy, buying your first house, having kids, just traveling the world and just experiencing life together with someone. So amazing. And my job as a wedding photographer is to just document the day that this journey begins, because that day is so important, because you're making a vow to stay side by side through all the ups and all the downs. So it really, really, really clarified and just cemented who I am as a wedding photographer. The other thing that this journey and this story has done for me is be super thankful and glad that I took the time before all of this happened to set my business up for success, to be able to run it while life is getting crazy and everything is just happening. if I didn't have systems and workflows and email templates all in place beforehand, I don't think I could have kept up with it. And if I hadn't kept up with it, then I wouldn't be able to contribute financially to all of the hospital bills and all of everything that went into everything that we did. And I'm just so thankful that I had the forethought and the knowledge to set those systems up. And my goal now is just to make sure that every photographer out there has the ability to, and the tips and the knowledge to build their business on a solid foundation so that you can, weather any storm that life is going to throw at you. Hopefully you're just planning like a maternity leave that you're going to be gone for 6 months and not like 9 heart surgeries. Okay, it wasn't 9, it was like 3 big ones, but still, like, hopefully that is something exciting that you're, stepping away from your business from, and not something traumatic. But I want other people to be able to continue to do something that they love, that serves the audience that they are called to serve. And that is the whole reason behind why I have started this podcast. So yes, the name, the Wise Photographer Podcast, is a fun twist on my last name, but it's also rooted in wanting to ensure that photographers are making wise decisions as they build their business so that it can weather any storms that life throws at you. If you do want to continue to make money and grow your business and serve clients that truly bring you joy and fulfillment. So there is my crazy long story. I am happy to report now that Justin is doing great. We made it 365 days without being admitted to the hospital. Last February, he was admitted to the hospital for 1 day with pneumonia, but they sent us home on some antibiotics and he got better after that. There wasn't any surgery, so that was a big improvement because every time we walk into a hospital, it seems like we end up having surgery. So it was good to be able to walk out of the hospital and let him drive home for a change. But yeah, he is doing great. Grayson is doing good. He's 2.5 now and crazy, loves tractors and loves combines and loves following his dad and his grandpa around on the farm. Skylar's doing great. She's in 1st grade now. And I am just so in love with my job right now and really thankful for this renewed sense of purpose in my work and this new adventure that this podcast is bringing me. So I hope that you will go ahead and tune into the next 2 episodes that are live right now on the podcast. If this is something that you want to continue to get updates on episodes, make sure you hit that subscribe button. And I'm so excited to be sharing all the best tips and tricks and guest episodes with you in the future. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will talk to you later.
Thanks for listening to the Wise Photographer Podcast. Dive into the show's notes for this episode and all past episodes at www.thewisephotographer.com. If you love the show, share it with a friend. Thanks for tuning in, you Wise Photographer, you.